Chapter 52. Father Michael talks to Bishop Isaac Sandy. It was 3 weeks that passed after the trial concerning my son Daniel. Daniel was sentenced to death by the system. Since then we attained a new bishop by the name of Bishop Father Isaac Sandy from South Africa. He is an older and very thin and short man. Isaac was born in Cairo, Egypt. He did some missionary work in Indonesia and Rio for about 11 years and then some work in Haiti for 17 years until he settled in South Africa for the past 25 years and now here in Chicago after almost 10 years. One early morning, he called for me into his office. I was very concerned of why. I took a deep breath and went to him. I entered his office and he greeted me with a smile from sitting behind his desk. "Good morning, Brother Michael," he said kindly to me. He extended his ringed hand to me. "Good morning, Father," I said to him, and then I kissed his ring. As I was beginning to sit down, suddenly, he had suggested for us to go for a walk in the garden outside in the back of the cathedral to talk. "It is indeed a lovely day," he said to me as he walked with his arms placed behind his back. I looked up into the sky and around the garden and then at Bishop Isaac. I stared at him in a curious expression, hoping for the opportunity to search his eyes. I was wondering what his intention was for him to bring me outside into the garden away from everyone inside. I responded to his remark. "Yes, sir, it is a beautiful day," I said as I looked around again. Isaac looked at me and smiled. And then he began to speak to me in his soft voice. "I can see by your expression that you are curious as to why I have asked you here, Brother Michael. I brought you out here personally to talk of things important because of all that has transpired. I feel that it would be best to your position here that we discuss what to do from this point regarding your son. It would be best to acknowledge what has happened in regards to his redemption, than to act as though it was just a nightmare, condemning him as if we are God, leaving no room for resolve. To be as this, only reveals the absence of compassion of you. I will respectfully assert that this is not of you, Brother Michael." "No, sir," I responded. He opened up his counsel to me. "One cannot move forwards with one's life until one has brought closure to what one thinks is in the past. There is a door in your life chapter that is still open, Brother Michael, a wound that still bleeds with a love and concern." It was strange to hear him say these words, because it was as if he knew that I was trying to forget about all that happened. I guess he could sense it by my trying to stay away from him since he came to the cathedral. Because of what happened, I was one that stood out for a while because of anger, resentment, and unforgiving hearts. I hated to stand out as that. To be seen as disgusting and self-destructive and therefore destructive to everyone. Many at the cathedral, regardless of my being excused by the Vatican, still thought that I should leave. Isaac continued to talk. "We cannot send anyone to the pit of fire by our personal judgment of him or her or what he or she does. We did not create the law, nor did any of us create heaven or hell. Honestly, we did not even create sin itself, Brother Michael. We can only strive to know what is right in God's eyes at our own level of divine understanding from God. But only God makes the decision of where the soul finally resides. We have to understand this properly, son. There were many lives lost because of this. And we owe this community very much in our efforts to help in its healing process. There are many who hate us and who are now gone from us because of feeling a great sense of betrayal. I knew that this conversation would eventually come, but I never wanted it to accrue. I appreciate your concern, sir," I said to him in a nervous tone. He looked at me as to tell me that I could relax in the walk. He looked again ahead as he spoke to me. "I did not bring you out here to point the finger at you, Brother Michael, as many have done. And there are some that will continue to do so after the sun rests this day. I am not that important. Nor do I possess that authority as many feels they do. I am only looking at what is best for the both of you and also for the well-being of the faith. The Catholic Church. It has taken a vicious blow to its head, the same as the past, as when we were accused of so many things during the world wars. The community is skeptical, as the Vatican is very concerned in the aftermath concerning the effects this has had upon the community and their affection towards us at this time. But, regardless of their flaw of impatience, I know the storm will soon pass and the sun will shine again on your life. It is the beauty, the reward of time. I am aware that you never had knowledge that this young man existed, Brother Michael, until he came to visit you. But, there is still the issue of your knowing that Mary Veu was carrying your child. That is the reality of this. So, you knew that he did exist in fact. I am sure you understand my concern in that area. I was still nervous, but I still responded, "Yes, sir, I do understand. I can only hope that the brethren forgive me for my sins and misfortune. I don't want to have to leave here, sir. I have lived my entire life thinking of nothing but being here. I am willing to endure any punishment they decide. All that I ask is mercy for my staying." Isaac, nodding his head, looked at me with assurance and said to me, "We have already forgiven Brother Michael your faults. It could have happened to any one of us. It was a human flaw. You have done a great service to this house, and this has not been forgotten. Regardless of your blunder, your stay here is secure. Even those in the community who are not pleased with you right now, their lives have been forever changed still for the better based upon the virtue of your counsel, which is by way. Not forgotten by them, they have said. And actually, they are observing of how your redemption will serve as an example and a great learning tool in their lives. I feel that I know I have let them all down. They will never trust me again. They will never listen to any words that I say." He explained, "It is not your flaw that they had begun to worship you in their joy, and placed you upon a pedestal that you did not belong upon, as none of us do. They forgot about the Master. It was only the affects of your dedication that caused this feeling in them, and it is that which will give them the strength to forgive. But all stone walls do fall in time, because in truth, we are fragile beings, yes, fragile in our walk of still always learning, because we are forever students, yes, students unto our deaths. We are destined to fall sometimes." His words penetrated something in me. I began to focus attentively. We place too much emphasis on our endurance of moral standards, and we sometimes forget that we are only human and do make mistakes. And those who admire us for our dedication forget this reality and mistakenly place us in the same light as Christ, who is perfect in his submission to God. It is a sin to willingly commit our faults, but in the same we not above making them, which makes all of this a complicated existence despite our desire to live in what we understand as perfection. And in truth, none of us know such a state other than we know that only the Creator possesses it. Therefore, mercy is granted for us because of our not knowing. The point, Brother Michael, is regarding your son who will be put to death by the will of man and of the will of his own conscious sins. What will you do for him right now in what time he has left? The courts may have sentenced him to death, but he still lives, and he is still your son. This makes you morally responsible for him at this time. This reality, brother, you cannot escape. It is written in stone within your heart and mind. And his mother Mary was indeed a woman who carried him, who gave physical birth to him, and so she too was and is a reality to consider. I was amazed at the amount of wisdom coming from this very small man. After thinking a moment, I spoke. I thought about him and what he has done to everyone because of me, regarding my parents and others. I find it hard to face him for what he has done. He then asked me, "You feel anger for him?" "Yes, I believe so," I answered. We stopped walking, and then he looked at me with eyes in which demanded honesty and asked me, "Or, just maybe, do you truly understand him in all of this, yes?" and can see some justification in his actions regardless of how evil they were. Or maybe it is yourself and what you created, that you are not willing to face. What is your truth of this? I stood there and my mind wandered of many things because he was forcing my mind to open to all possibilities. Areas of where healing could be made possible as well as hidden wounds inflicted. He said, yes, he did murder your parents, but they were his grandparents as well. I can't help but to believe that he grieves this inside brother considering the truth of this knowledge. This could just be your guilt giving you this understanding. I stared at him and asked him, do you understand him? He looked over at the children, who were working in the garden and said to me still looking away, in some ways, I do. Daniel is not the only one who is a victim of fault-ridden parents and sodomy, Brother Michael. I looked at Isaac, who was now looking back at me as to tell me that he too was a victim of the same life that Daniel was. You? I asked him. Yes, he said with a calm face. For a second I could not look at him, so I turned away my face and my head dropped in shame. I thought to myself, of his age, for years have this been happening to children. For here was a man old enough to be my grandfather and he too has been victimized by the same evil. That moment it took every ounce of intelligence to divide the church from this abominable act. I then looked back at Isaac, who was staring at me smiling. I am the son of a priest and the son of a nun. In this reality are Daniel and I brothers in its evil against the church. We are both victims. But, I had a father who wanted to resolve things out with my mother regardless of the situation. They confessed their sins to the church and my parents made arrangements, and the arrangements that they made were to leave the cathedral and get married. They decided to live a devoted life as just Catholics, but they sought to send me through to be a priest. I would guess to live their lives in the faith through me. I stand before you this day a healed man. Yes, I too was sodomized, but by the grace of God I survived. Isaac pointed to the side his head, tapping upon his finger to imply that his mind was free of hurt regarding the affects of the memory. Life, it is full of choices, Brother Michael. It is the greatest gift of the mind, it is the place of where we must allow God to be our life's navigator. To look back, is to turn ourselves into a bitter pillar of salt. Inside. And then he laid his small hand on his heart to imply that he forgave those who abused his body. My heart was filled with such love and compassion for this man, because I began to understand his bringing me out of the cathedral to talk. I smiled at him and said, "And you're able to smile today. Such strength. You are an incredible man." He shook his head as to tell me no. I was confused in this, and when I began to ask him of why, he began to tell me how he survived the ordeal. He said, "It was not of any miraculous ability of my own son, it was the virtue of God in others as well as myself. I had someone to comfort me in my pain, Brother Michael. It was God living through my father and mother that saved my life. It means so much to those who are hurt to have also something tangible sent to us by God to help us in our time of need. I myself chose not to kill others because of my pain, because the virtue of God was nurtured in me. My parents understood that it is not the faith, but those who have come into the church to destroy the aim of it." Isaac placed his hand on my shoulder and said to me, looking me in my eyes, "He is no stranger to you anymore, he is your son. What he has done, does not escape that reality. That should make it easier for you face him, Brother Michael, more so easier for anyone else in his life whom he does not know at this time. This day he has no one, but you. As he has forever needed your presence in his living." I suddenly was full of a zeal for Daniel. It was strange to feel this feeling for him. I guess that this zeal was my nature of me being his biological father. I believe it was love. "What do you suggest me to do, sir?" I eagerly asked Bishop Isaac. He smiled at me and said, I believe you know what you should do, brother. I don't think you need me to tell you that. It was a long time ago, but I do remember Mary. I was shocked. I had no idea that he knew Mary Veilleux. You knew her? I asked. Yes, he answered with a calm smile on his face. I met her in seminary years ago. She told me of her struggle of the flesh. She was a very kind woman, and if he is anything as she was, he will be glad to see you if you seek to comfort him at this time regardless of what have happened. This is your chance to be a father to him. Something he has needed all of his life. It is your choice too if you will deprive him of such. She never wrote in her diary of talking to any one of us, but she told this man of her wanting comfort from me. This was his implication of Daniel needing comfort of me and being of his mother characteristically. I looked around at the garden that was filled with beautiful partly flowered trees. There were children working in the garden sweeping and raking leaves and was being supervised by nuns as rose petals were blowing in the wind. I listened to the talk and laughs of the children. Isaac looked at me in wonder. He told me, one of our greatest sacrifices in growth, Brother Michael, is our willingness to forgive others for their shortcomings. It frees us from the bondage of self-hate. There are none of us that have not fallen short of the glory of God, my son. So, in this truth should we understand the flaw of sin itself. We are all one in it no matter who we are or where we come from. We all have fallen victim of the same thing as a ditch causing our path to be broken. It is the sins of the innocent. After a short pause he asks, "Tell me, what are you thinking right now?" I'm listening to these children in all of their joy. And what are your thoughts on this matter? He asked me and I said to him. I remember Daniel writing of how at peace he felt working in a flower garden. How normal he felt complete. I see these children as they also are filled with that same joy that he spoke of. We have to keep them as they are, sir. We can't let them go astray as he did and become what he became. If we do, then we are again creators of more monsters. Isaac then looked at me with a curious look, slightly squinting his eyes, and asked me, "Is this what you see Daniel as? A monster?" I paused for a couple of seconds, because I had come to realize that Daniel was not at fault for his condition, but in his choice in doing what he did, he was indeed responsible for his own conscious actions the same as Isaac. But, I was still unsure, and then I answered. "I don't know what to call him, sir." He then told me, "Isaac's son, you need to go to that prison and learn of what and who he is, Brother Michael, and not allow what your sins and the sins of other men dictate how you should view your only son. Regardless of what he has done, he is a victim of the evil doings of corrupted men. Yes, he made bad choices, but there were choices before his, that left him no choice in fact. If you see him as a monster, then you will not be able to help him. You cannot counsel who you have already condemned." The bishop and I shared a quiet moment. I thanked this wise and gentle man who was softly smiling at me. I bent down and kissed his ring. I looked him in the eyes, smiling at him, holding and shaking his hand and fighting my tears of sincere appreciation, because of this man bringing me such profound wisdom and guidance on what to do. Something inside me wanted to hold on to this moment forever. He looked me in the eyes and smiled, nodding his head, and then he began to walk away. As he walked away, I watched him and I couldn't help thinking to myself as my eyes began to tear, "Small frame of a man, heart of a giant." You know, the word says that God created us in his image and after his likeness. That day did I recognize God in this great man. I saw God's presence in him, in his humble and kind air. His wisdom, I believe, was from God because it had guidance in it and contentment of mind. I wondered if it were I, would I have been able to rise to his level of understanding? I thought of Daniel Veilleux being of my flesh. I thought of it no more in the formal sense. Bishop Isaac walked back towards the cathedral, and I stood alone in the garden still watching the children who were raking leaves from the ground. He looked back and smiled at me as he disappeared in the distance. As I walked further into the garden, I came upon a small bench. I sat down to reflect on the discussion I had with Isaac. The talk caused me to remember what Daniel told me, and what Mary wrote in her diary. Everything was starting to make sense. Only then did I realize our mistakes in all of this. Daniel was right about Mary and I. I could hear the words Daniel spoke in my mind. Sometimes my anger sparks for the both of you, Father. Neither one of you should have been here. This was not a place for you. He was right. It is true that the both of us should not have been here. The moment that we began the relationship and knew that we loved one another and knew that there was a child. We should have left the ministry, the same way the parents of Bishop Isaac did. Instead, I felt that I wanted this more than anything in the world. Also, my parents would have never accepted Mary because of her background, a background that I did not even care enough to find out while she was alive with me. So how would I even know if they had accepted her? Why did they give that assumption in my mind of how they would see her? I began to tear so much. The tears streamed down my face. I felt so manipulated and poisoned by them and their vain traditions. Their attitudes were so harsh to the poor when no family is born into this world rich. At the beginning someone was not so rich as I said before. But, it seems to me that in this wicked world, it is the wicked like my parents was who seem to get all of the opportunity. They inherit so much permanency because of their money and so-called power. So, judgmental my parents were of other people and their backgrounds that it rubbed off on me in my dealings with people, no matter who it hurt. They gave me bad insight regarding people who were not on their level regarding status. I saw her as a mere peasant because that was the way that my parents, that I believe, would have seen her. They fed me that poison, and until this day it has reaped terror in my life and the lives of other people. And it shows without saying of how much of a failure that they truly were regardless of their financial status. My rejection of Mary and Daniel was but the sheer ignorance of my mother and father implemented within me. This superiority complex is so damaging to others. It hides and lurks in your upbringing and your perspective without you knowing it until one day of realization. It is indeed a poison fed to you by your so-called elders who you are to honor and respect on principle, no matter what. This complex causes everyone else to feel less important and as though they are an outcast, or as though they are a mistake created by God, which is never possible because God doesn't make mistakes. This complex is so cruel to make anyone feel worthless and useless, and yet they live in this world with you and everyone else feeling as though they are being buried alive because of an unjust rejection due to their so-called miserable lot. I now realize that all of my negative faults are but a reflection of an improper upbringing. I came to realize that Daniel was also a product of my improper upbringing. Now I sit here in a cathedral as a man of so-called pious demeanor. I thought of Mary's words in her diary. I thought on how easy it was for her to let go of her aspirations of attending school after she met me. Then her words came to life in my mind. Mary's words. I was terrified because I knew where this would lead, and I wanted this to happen. Instantly I questioned my time here in the school. At that moment my life took a complete turn in the opposite direction. Damn, from the very beginning we failed our only son before he was even conceived. She did ask me what I was going to do. She wanted me to leave the cathedral and begin a family, but I was too cruel, selfish and loyal to my parents. I remember her every words as if she was sitting right next to me speaking them, Mary's words. Why are we letting this go on? We know that this can't be if we are going to be in the cathedral, in this life. I have been waiting for you to say something about this. I need to know your feelings on this matter. Please talk to me. So loyal to my parents, so much so that I couldn't do what was right in God's eyes. If I really wanted this as much as I claimed, would have had the strength not to go to Mary and talk with her under that tree. I would have had the conviction within every step that I took. If she really wanted this, then it would have not been so easy for her to reject all of God's commandments for a mere man, such as myself. The both of us have done a great injustice to Daniel. I pray that God forgive us in our blindness. While I was deep in thought, a little boy approached me, and asks if I would help them to rake the leaves in the garden. I smiled at the child and then took him by the hand as he led me to the area they were working. As I worked, I could not help but to envision my son and I working side by side, in our yard. My God, what have I done? The sins of the son are truly the sins of the innocent. Written by David Anthony Brayboy.